Hey everyone, and welcome right into today's Explainer. We're doing something a little bit different today. We're unpacking a fascinating piece of literary analysis, a review that completely turns the idea of reading outside our comfort zones on its head. We're going to explore Sucheta Dasgupta's book, Ladies' Night. But listen, this isn't your standard book breakdown. This is actually a really cool story about a super rigid, hard news nonfiction reader who unexpectedly found themselves totally swept up in a world of magic realism, memory, and music. It's a journey going from absolute, deep skepticism to genuine, open-minded curiosity.
So here's the big question that's driving our whole explainer today. Can a book steeped in fable and speculative fiction actually captivate someone whose entire literary diet consists of the hard, cold edges of reality? I mean, it's a tough sell, right? Think about it. If you only read history, science, and cold, hard facts, handing you a book that literally bends reality is a massive leap. But, as you'll see, the way Dasgupta actually builds her narrative completely bypasses all those analytical defenses. It's pretty amazing.
To really get how this happened, we've got to set the scene a bit. The reviewer actually notes that they started reading Ladies' Night on a quiet, slow evening at home. Picture this, okay? Time is just kind of stretching out. Their daughter has some music playing in the background, specifically 90s and 2000s tracks just drifting through the house on an Amazon Echo Dot. That atmosphere, it's absolutely crucial. It completely softened the reviewer's typically hard-edged mindset, pulling them back to a time when they carried a much more tender heart, the kind of mindset that's actually willing to just sit with stories and let them linger.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today. We're looking at 1. The nonfiction reader's pivot. 2. Framing the ladies' night. 3. Where reality meets surrealism. 4. Women quietly claiming space. And 5. Imperfect, persuasive, and raw. Let's dive right in. Starting us off with Section 1. The nonfiction reader's pivot.
You can see right away there is just a completely stark contrast between the reviewer's normal world and the world of this book. On one side, we've got the reviewer's usual comfort zone, the quantifiable, strictly factual stuff. We're talking biographies, science, history, philosophy, hard reportage. This is not someone who's browsing a bookstore hoping to magically disappear into a fantasy novel. On the other side, we have what Ladies' Night actually is: magic realism, fable, and speculative fiction. Picking up this book meant entirely stepping outside their established lane. So, why do it?
Well, the answer boils down to one word: trust. This book didn't just randomly pop up on a bookstore shelf for them. It bypassed all that usual skepticism because it came through highly trusted, rock-solid channels. It was sent over by publisher Chitra Veeraraghavan, and it was recommended by a dear friend, Darpan Singh. And honestly, here's the kicker: Singh himself is a veteran who spent 2 decades deep in the trenches of hard news. Because it came from someone so deeply rooted in objective reality, our reviewer didn't put up their usual walls. They approached it with genuine, open curiosity. Moving right along to Section 2, Framing the Ladies' Night.
Now, if there's one thing you need to know going in, it's that Ladies' Night outright refuses to behave like your standard, run-of-the-mill short story collection. Seriously, if you dive into this expecting a neat, tidy format with predictable beginnings, middles, and ends, you are going to be completely thrown off balance. It constantly shifts genres, moving seamlessly from the very real to the totally surreal, and it often does it without any warning whatsoever. So instead of some rigid, forced plot device, Dasgupta uses this brilliant framing technique. The Ladies' Night in the title actually refers to a loose, bar-like setting where all these stories unfold. Think of it less as a location and more as a metaphor for freedom, deep conversation, and completely uninhibited expression. It's such a clever, light-handed premise. This bar setting acts like connective tissue. It's a space that just lets the characters breathe and share, rather than shoving the stories into some sort of predetermined box.
Which brings us to Section 3, where reality meets surrealism.
Look, magic realism can be super intimidating, right? But Dasgupta doesn't just drop her readers into a bizarre, confusing fantasy world on page 1. Instead, she starts her stories in these incredibly recognizable, human emotional spaces, things we all know, like relationships, memory, and longing. It's only after you're comfortable, after you're settled in, that she slowly stretches the narrative into the unfamiliar. It never demands that you take some huge leap of faith into the fantastical. It just gently invites you in. And honestly, that transition is exactly where the magic of this book lives. To give you a real taste of what this actually feels like to read, the reviewer pointed out this incredibly evocative line from early on in the book. A storyteller is describing someone they're falling for, and they say, "He makes me dream of big, golden lions with eyes that speak, that enter my house through the windows and park themselves about the furniture." I mean, wow.
It's a description of romance that is so vivid and so entirely unexpected that it completely disarmed the reader's hyper-analytical brain.
In fact, that specific imagery was so powerful, it literally made the lines of an old, virally popular Lata Mangeshkar song ring right in the reviewer's ears. A song all about the doors of the heart being left slightly ajar, and first love just sort of quietly creeping in. And this is exactly why that setting we talked about earlier mattered so much. The background music in their house, combined with Dasgupta's incredibly lyrical prose, woke up that nostalgic, tender side of the reader. It allowed vulnerability to just exist on the page without judgment, even for the biggest nonfiction skeptic.
All right, moving to section 4, women quietly claiming space. So consider this awesome mental contrast for a second. In the prologue, Dasgupta points out that it's almost always women who step out into extreme weather. The reviewer, obviously still holding on to a bit of that non-fiction bias, immediately felt their mind wander to actual, literal construction sites across India's sprawling cities. Bare-chested men building these massive high towers, physically constructing the modern landscape. But the book quietly and masterfully pivots entirely away from that physical infrastructure. Instead, it focuses purely on women quietly claiming emotional, social, and imaginative space.
And how exactly does she pull this off without losing the interest of a hardened factual reader? Well, the subtext here is never loud and it's never declarative. There's zero preaching going on. Instead, this quiet sense of empowerment just unfolds naturally through the choices her characters make and, maybe even more importantly, the choices they flat out refuse to make. It's the ultimate masterclass in showing rather than telling. And that subtlety, that's exactly what kept the analytical reviewer hooked. They felt like they were witnessing reality play out, rather than just being handed a lecture.
Which takes us to our final section, section 5, imperfect, persuasive, and raw.
Now, let's be real for a second. The reviewer is totally honest that this book isn't some flawless, perfectly paced thriller that you're going to finish in one sitting. There are definitely moments where the prose leans so heavily into its lyrical style that it risks lingering a little too long. The reviewer even admits that during these parts, they caught their mind drifting, kind of just wanting the plot to move forward already. But, and this is key, just as they'd start to drift away, Dasgupta drops a strikingly vivid image or a brilliant line that completely snaps them right back in.
So what's the ultimate takeaway here? Yeah, it's an uneven collection of stories. Some of them land with this immense clarity and absolute force, while others feel a bit more like unresolved experiments. But as the reviewer notes, Ladies' Night clearly isn't trying to please every single reader with a uniform, perfectly balanced plot. It's a book that wants to push boundaries, explore, and sit comfortably in ambiguity. And despite those imperfections, it absolutely delivers a raw, imaginative freshness that, against all odds, successfully won over a die-hard, hard-edged skeptic. Which leaves us with this final, really important thought to chew on. If a book like this can completely break through the armor of a reader whose entire literary life is built on facts, data, and hard reportage, what might happen if you challenge your own reading habits? Seriously, are you willing to step outside your usual lane, embrace the surreal, and just sit with a little ambiguity? Who knows? It just might awaken a tender heart you totally forgot you even had. Thanks so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and hey, keep exploring out there.